Hello again, and welcome back to Year 4 of the Religious Education Initiative. This is week 13, day 1. We're reading our third selection from the book of Judges and finishing the story of Gideon. So last time we saw Gideon lead the men of Israel against the Midianites. We saw how God told him to send many of them home again, several times in a row, until only 300 men were left. We discussed how God was showing Gideon in this way that the victory that would be won was not Gideon's victory or Israel's victory, but the Lord's victory, his deliverance of his people from oppression. Gideon, unfortunately, seems to miss that point in giving his men the battle cry, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon!" But nonetheless, God gave them a great victory, and the Midianites were routed. So, we will pick up the story in the midst of the pursuit of the fleeing invaders. So this is verse 24 of chapter 7, and then we'll continue on through chapter 8. Then Gideon sent messengers throughout all the hill country of Ephraim, saying, "Come down against the Midianites, and seize the waters against them, as far as Beth-bara, and also the Jordan." So all the men of Ephraim were called out, and they seized the waters as far as Beth-bara, and also the Jordan. They captured the two captains of Midian, Oreb and Zeeb. They killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb, and Zeeb they killed at the winepress of Zeeb, as they pursued the Midianites. They brought the heads of Oreb and Zeeb to Gideon beyond the Jordan. Then the Ephraimites said to him, "What have you done to us, not to call us when you went to fight against the Midianites?" And they upbraided him violently. So he said to them, "What have I done now in comparison with you? Is not the gleaming of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? God has given into your hands the captains of Midian, Oreb and Zeeb. What have I been able to do in comparison with you?" When he said this, their anger against him subsided. Then Gideon came to the Jordan and crossed over, he and the 300 who were with him, exhausted and famished. So he said to the people of Succoth, "Please give some loaves of bread to my followers, for they are exhausted, and I am pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian." But the officials of Succoth said, "Do you already have in your possession the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna, that we should give bread to your army?" Gideon replied, "Well then, when the Lord has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, I will trample your flesh on the thorns of the wilderness and on briars." From there he went up to Penuel and made the same request of them. And the people of Penuel answered him as the people of Succoth had answered. So he said to the people of Penuel, "When I come back victorious, I will break down this tower." Now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor with their army, about 15,000 men, all who were left of all the army of the people of the east, for 120,000 men bearing arms had fallen. So Gideon went up by the caravan route east of Nobach and Jogbehach, and attacked the army, for the army was off its guard. Zebah and Zalmunna fled, and he pursued them, and took the two kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna, and threw all the army into a panic. When Gideon, son of Joash, returned from the battle by the ascent of Heres, he caught a young man, one of the people of Succoth, and questioned him, and he listed for him the officials and elders of Succoth, 77 people. Then he came to the people of Succoth and said, "Here are Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you taunted me, saying, 'Do you already have in your possession the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna, that we should give bread to your troops who are exhausted?'" So he took the elders of the city, and he took thorns of the wilderness and briars, and with them he trampled the people of Succoth. He also broke down the tower of Penuel, and killed the men of the city. Then he said to Zebah and Zalmunna, "What about the men whom you killed at Tabor?" They answered, "As you are, so were they, every one of them. They resembled the sons of a king." And he replied, "They were my brothers, the sons of my mother. As the Lord lives, if you had saved them alive, I would not kill you." So he said to Jether, his firstborn, "Go, kill them." But the boy did not draw his sword, for he was afraid, because he was still a boy. Then Zebah and Zalmunna said, "You come and kill us, for as the man is, so is his strength." So Gideon proceeded to kill Zebah and Zalmunna, and he took the crescents that were on the necks of their camels. Then the Israelites said to Gideon, "Rule over us, you and your son and your grandson also, for you have delivered us out of the hand of Midian." Gideon said to them, "I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." Then Gideon said to them, "Let me make a request of you. Each of you give me an earring he has taken as booty." For the enemy had golden earrings, because they were Ishmaelites. "We will willingly give them," they answered. So they spread a garment, and each threw into it an earring he had taken as booty. The weight of the golden earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, apart from the crescents and the pendants and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, and the collars that were on the necks of their camels. Gideon made an ephod of it, and put it in his town, in Ophrah, and all Israel prostituted themselves to it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family. So Midian was subdued before the Israelites, and they lifted up their heads no more. So the land had rest 40 years in the days of Gideon. Jerubbaal, that's Gideon, son of Joash, went to live in his own house. Now Gideon had 70 sons, his own offspring, for he had many wives. His concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son, and he named him Abimelech. Then Gideon, son of Joash, died at a good old age, and was buried in the tomb of his father Joash, at Ophrah of the Abiezrites. As soon as Gideon died, the Israelites relapsed, and prostituted themselves with the Baals, making Baal-berith their god. The Israelites did not remember the Lord their God, who had rescued them from the hand of all their enemies on every side. And they did not exhibit loyalty to the house of Jerubbaal, that is, Gideon, in return for all the good that he had done to Israel. Okay, so it seems like it starts great. Gideon's winning this grand victory, or rather, he is the instrument of the Lord winning this victory. And then, well, all we seem to see is dissension and competition and craving the glory of this victory. The Ephraimites are mad at Gideon because he went and started the fight without them. So now he got the glory, and he has to crawl and say, "I am nothing next to you. I'm just the gleaning, I'm like the gleaning of the grapes." No, he says the gleaning of the grapes, the leavings, the leftovers of the grapes of Ephraim are better than the very, very best of Abiezer. I've got nothing. God has given into your hands the leaders of Midian. I can't do anything next to you. He doesn't seem to believe it, but he says it so they're not mad at him anymore. And then he goes and he asks for help from these towns, and they say, "When you've actually won, come back." Now you might think this is fair, because how do they know whether he'll come back victorious? If he is defeated and it is found out that they had helped a rebel, maybe they're worried they'll be killed. It doesn't make it right to refuse to help a fellow Israelite. But what we see here is that notion of unity is falling apart here. It's every man for himself, every family for himself, every tribe for itself. And Gideon is not all that much better. He goes, he wins his victory, and then he comes back and he sacks these 2 Israelite cities. Maybe it's justice, but it seems a fit of pique, a matter of temper. He's establishing for himself a name as a king. But when he comes back, and they say, "You, rule over us," and he says, No, I'm not going to rule over you. But he says, "God will rule over you." By that, does he mean that he's going to retire and stop being proud and just live a normal life, continue to farm his little plot? No. He means he's going to make a statue, an idol, a something that will be in his power, in his possession, and that the people will come to worship the Lord with. But Gideon will be in possession of that means of making the people worship God. So when he says, "The Lord will rule over you," he means I've got God in my pocket. God will rule over you. But the way he names his son, Abimelech, kind of gives away the secret, because Abimelech means my father is the king. So if you name your son, "My father is the king," then you're basically saying, "Yeah, I'm a king." Not to mention, he has many wives. He has these 70 sons. He's living like a Canaanite king. So Gideon has lost the plot. He received the Lord's blessings. He received a victory, and what did he do with it? He built himself up and established his own power. At least he required the people to worship Yahweh, the God of Israel, using this idol that he sets up. Not the right way. It's still a sin. It's still idolatry. And it's almost, in some sense, I'm not going to say it's worse, but you're trying to make the one true God of Israel like the other gods of the nations. That's not a good thing, to say the least. But then he dies, and everything goes from bad to worse. We're not going to read about it, but his son Abimelech, as soon as Gideon dies, Abimelech massacres all the other sons of Gideon and makes himself a king, and goes around conquering people and sacking Israelite cities until a woman drops a millstone on his head, and he dies. So that's how things are going. Israel is not doing very well at being faithful in the Promised Land. And we've seen these places before, Succoth and Peniel. These are the places where Jacob came through on his way from Haran, from Padan Aram, coming back to the Promised Land. So these should be places of significance, places of blessing, places of thanksgiving to God. And instead, it's every man for himself. So things are not going well in the time of the Judges. Next time we'll see a little bit more of an uplifting story, though. For now, that's next week. For now, God bless you. We'll see you shortly for day 2.